Okay, so here's the small yard section re and read. This is code 55 on evergreen plastic ties. These ties, just to recap, were CA'd down onto the cork that was sealed with matte medium or other stuff before when I pulled up the old ones. And then this is code 55 weathered rail. But you can see I used metal joiners here and soldered them. I cleaned off all the black in it for solder there. And then these are insulators, but they're transition joiners from Micro Engineering, code 55 to code 70. So it makes a nice, smooth transition. So you can't tell, right? Now, what I did was I pre-drilled holes, which is really easy to do. And then I used the micro spikes every fourth tie. And then I just wicked in some thin CA. And, you know, the rail's not going anywhere and it's not even ballasted. So I'll paint this. And then, of course, this part of the crossing gets covered. Like, see where my thumb is? Oh, here, let me show you a quick photo. See, like, this is from location. Like, see how the asphalt, like, there's a couple tracks here. See how the asphalt comes out here? Like, this is a public crossing here, but it's uncontrolled. But it's like they didn't finish the pedestrian part here. I don't know. Maybe it's budget or something. So the shoulders of this road are quite random and almost unfinished in that sense. There's no concrete curbs or anything, or is there any? It's all asphalt, but it isn't consistent along the fringes, right? So this will be asphalted where my thumb is. Like, this is the code 70 right here, and then this is code 55. So you won't even notice, but it'll just be silky smooth, you know, right? You know what I mean? And that way I have the right height, like all the rest of this track work and flange work that I'm doing, that will make this a nice asphalt, you know, municipality kind of feel crossing. Okay, so this was a little bit more work than I had planned, but I'm glad I did it, and it's solid, and the radius is beautiful now, and she's good to go, and I can move forward and finish the buried track paved crossing here. Okay. Okay, how's everybody doing? So I want to follow up on this sort of final track work on section 2, sort of part 3. Like, this is where it merges in. Like, here's the seam to section 3. You can sort of see how it joins here, but the track, like these two tracks, they need to meet up to the seam, kind of. It doesn't have to be perfect, because if I ever separate this, I'll just zip cut it with a Dremel and then just put track in there. Like, you worry about those issues if you have to move your layout, but you want to make sure that your track is really solid at these joins. I mean, there are different ways of doing that. You can put, I've done in the past, I've laid in a brass strapping in here and countersunk screws and then soldered the ends of the rail. You know, there's lots of ways of doing it, but I'm not worried about that because this is open exposed track and I want to see the ties and stuff. And this here is a non-issue for me right now. You deal with those things when you have to move, but if you can minimize your work, then it's to your advantage. Now, I want to point out just a couple of things here that I think are important when you're doing custom track work, scratch building, etc. So here is what I would call the best read, okay, or dissertation on track work by Paul Mallory. This is, I picked this up at Inner City Trains and Hobbies. I love this store, by the way, and I think they're going to be one of the best, soon, one of the best model railroad shops in Canada at the rate they're going. Just the way they do business, and, you know, estate sales always coming. It's like books like this is the first edition. Look, I have the revised one. This is better. You want to know why? It has more drawings in it. Like, it has far more drawings in it than the revised edition. And it's just awesome. It's an awesome book. So Paul Mallory, bless his soul, you know, this master did so much for the model railroading hobby. It's a really good read. Some people find it unnecessary to read. That's too bad. But Anyway, if you ever find time to read, it's a really good read or a book to go through, and some of the techniques are still relevant today. So a couple things here. So these are the small spikes that I'm using here. I'll show you what I'm doing. I really like these little micro spikes. They seem to be hard to get. See the difference in the two sizes? These are good enough for code 70, code 83, code 100 and up. But once you get down to code 55, you want to be using these micro spikes. And I cherish them like in a little special bin that I have. But I'll show you what I'm doing here. So this section in here is going to be buried. So normally this particular track here is code 55. It's sort of a siding that runs along this track work. So I didn't want to run code 55 through the buried asphalt. I wanted to keep it consistent with all the other tracks so the road is nice and level. And if I put a bit of a crown on the approach and the trailing part of the road, then it just runs into issues, right? So what I thought I would do is, well, as you know, I pulled up this track here because it was out of radius. See there, you can see the old ties here. It was too sharp here. And that might seem nitpicky, but it makes all the difference in the world the way my other turnouts are already custom built to match up. So that's why I did this. And I wanted to mirror this rail, like this curve here, which is from rail to rail is 39 millimeters. So that's how I'm establishing this curve. And sometimes when you get into small sections like this, you run into problems with kinks. I'm not worried about it here or on the other track because there's curves that are already established that'll meet those. But because I'm going to be joining up code 55 to code 70, you can run into kinks when you're in a curve like this because there's two different gauge rail or code rail. And what I like to do is I put a little, just ever so subtle kink in the actual rail before the join where these insulated rail joiners are. It's so subtle you won't notice it, but if you don't do that, you'll end up with a kink where the rail joins together if you use an insulated rail joiners, and it looks ugly. If you just put a kink just before that, about ½ an inch or so, very subtle, you'll never see it, and the track will run nice and like the radius will be nice and smooth. Now some people say, well, why insulated rail joiners? Well, because I like to block my track out for sensors, track sensors, etc. ahead of time. So when I go to install signals and crossing gates and things, it's already in place, right? Rail insulators are not to fill the gap in between. They do have that feature on them. They're to keep the rails lined up. If you get any movement from wood, cork, or anything, that's what they're for. So, or you can use the nickel ones to solder with. But when you use the insulators and you're running them in a curve, you can run into issues. Now, here's another way you can deal with that is by pinning the track, right? So I take one of these small nails and okay, where's my little pliers? Okay, we'll use these little nippers for now. So I just grab one gently like this, and I pre-drilled, like right here, I pre-drilled into the styrene tie. It just goes through like butter if you have a sharp drill bit, okay? And then what I do is you can see where I laid down random ties and I cut out ties in this microengineering flex because these ties glue down much better than these Delrin ties do. Like the styrene onto like a Varathane sealed cork or matte medium sealed cork. It's really aggressive, the CA, when you have scribed plastic ties. So I have a solid base, track base, and I'm really big on that, as some of you may or may not know. I'm kind of overkill that way, but this is the advantage of not building on foam, right? You won't be able to do this. It won't work the same way because you don't have a solid substrate. So when you have plywood and cork, Bob's your uncle when it comes to laying custom track and revising and cutting into it and whatever. So I'm gonna keep this radius established by putting in a spike every 10 ties or so, or every odd white tie. Now this isn't glued down, but it's just solid, and I only have 6 spikes on here. Or no, wait, I got 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 spikes for this section that's 14 inches long, and it's good to go. I'll put a couple on the end here. See the movement there? That's what causes your kinks. You want to make sure that this is spiked right to the end and really solid. So when you join up your other track, these are metal or nickel, so I'll solder those so they'll stay straight. Like I'll solder straight sections and then bend them into where my turnout trails a little ways down onto section 3. So that's how I'm going to deal with that. And remember to use your NMRA gauge, right? Yeah. Okay, so once I get this done, then I have all the other track prepared for filling. And this track will basically go back into code 70 on section 3, and there'll be a transition down through this yard section into code 55 on the other part over here, okay?